Good morning. I've been awake and then back to bed and been back up. This is I guess, one of my days to be depressed. Or, no, I don't think depressed, that's the right. Yeah, depressed, I think is right. um, I'm trying to figure out what to do. Sometimes I think just continue Howard's Notebook, but not as often as I do, and just have to take an early retirement or something. If I had the money, I'd go a different direction. I'm not sure what I'd do. I wouldn't stream 24 hours a day anymore. In fact, I don't really like streaming the way it works, or would work. But a lot of you do like it. It's very popular. That's all right. You don't have to thank me for it. You don't have to thank me for inventing it. Of course, you can't invent something when. Well, I don't know what I'm saying. When I was streaming, as far as I know, I was the first one. I couldn't find anybody else in the world streaming. When people came to my site, which was running on a computer with very little memory, and what I found out, with a video card that didn't have very much memory in it. I told you about that, so it's here someplace. I wish I'd have gone different directions, I think. Or do I? I miss those early days of the computer bulletin board system. And the people. And everything. BBS, the documentary, is it was put into the public domain or whatever. You can make copies of it. I could run it. It lasts what? Well, I'd just do the one DVD about computer bulletin boards. I wouldn't do the rest. He covered a whole bunch of subjects related to that. I could run it. BBS, the documentary about and I could run it, and I could hit it, and I could pause it even, because he asked a ton of questions, and then they could give their thing, and then I could talk about it as long as I wanted to, and then move on to the next. There's a lot of stuff I could do, but it doesn't sound very exciting anymore. Anybody remember the name of? I forgot the name of the bug. These things that are going to hatch out, billions of them here before long. That happens every, 7 years or 9 years or something. There was a movie I forget what it was called. I watched it. A good movie. Um, Darlene, man, she watches nonstop television and movies and that kind of stuff. The ex-wife. And she says, well, those movies are out there someplace. No. Well, we know there's always some that are, stuck away someplace. I wish with what they do is the West Wing series. Now, you can watch that. I think you have to go to, I think it's Amazon. And you can watch, but what is it? I think it's very expensive per episode. I mean, and there was, 3 years of it or something? I can't afford that. I did, the West Wing, I watched when it was running. I'll be done here in a second. I watched it, and then when the thing, I started over, I think it is a great, great, television series. Let's see, that was, okay, one day ago, so I still, it's that, audio and video should get better in about 20 days. Video, 122 views. I'm not sure my site is going to get better in 20 days. I think it's just going to maybe stay like this. I love cheese. I'm not sure why, but it's good, I forget how old Jimmy was, my son, my youngest. I think he's 37 now. Is it 37? I don't think it's 47. Anyway. He, I came from a Catholic family. My father had, I think it was 6 or 7 brothers, and he had three sisters. It was a large Catholic family, and all the other families around there were large Catholic families. Or even if they weren't Catholic, they were large families. That was just something, And so anyway, I grew up, I was an altar boy and all the whole, went to Holy Name grade school, Catholic, and I went to then St. Vincent's, and that was in the parish where my father and his family, they lived, and, so those 6 or 7 Howard boys and their 3 sisters, that's where they went, And then I ended up going there for the 6th and 7th grade. No, wait a minute. There was no 7th grade. See, I went there for the 5th and 6th grade. And the 6th and 7th grade were combined. I mean, it was like one, because the Catholic schools, most of them couldn't afford to have a seventh grade, a junior high or whatever you want to call that. I mean, we had to collect, we sold stuff door to door. The kids did. We collected papers, brought that in, and that was sold. A truck came and picked them up, and the school sold that by the pound or something. I mean, it was something. So anyway, I got married at 26, and Darlene and I were married for, let's see, 12 years. So our kids didn't go to the Catholic schools, really. So they sort of missed out on that tradition. Anyway, my son, my youngest, when he was living with me, the kids lived with me for several years. And then they went to live with their mother. Not all at once. One would go, one, and then they'd be gone. But anyway, my youngest, my son, he decided that he wanted to become a Catholic. So I'm not sure why I'm going to tell this story. It doesn't sound that great. I'm not. Well, I guess it's just the cheese made me think of it or whatever. But so my son started going to, up to the church, I don't know how, for classes, twice a week or something like that. And so the next door neighbor, and he would be about a little bit, maybe a couple of years younger than my son, or whatever. And he lived next door with the oldest brother. I wasn't living in that trailer. He had an older brother, the boy next door, Troy. And then he had a younger brother, but was still quite a few years older than Troy. And anyway, so Troy and Jimmy, were hanging out. So Troy decided that he wanted to be a Catholic. And of course, they weren't, I don't think his family liked Catholics. So he was going with my son to, the class. And I didn't really realize it at that time. It was a little bit later that I realized that my son had schizophrenia. And is going through, problems. And all of us have been going through problems because of that. But anyway, the pastor at the Catholic Church kicked my son, out of the class. There weren't very many in the class, by the way. Because I'm not sure why. My son was acting inappropriately, I guess. And he wasn't, fitting into what he should be fitting into. And but the boy next door, he loved it. And, the church and all that kind of stuff. Not only did he become a Catholic, but he knew more about it than I did. And I was an older boy and my entire life, grade school and high school. Catholic school. High school was Christian Brothers, and it was a military academy on top of that. I always have to say, my parents didn't have money. It sounds like if you went to an academy or a Christian, no, my dad was a Boilermaker. My mother, in the beginning, during World War II, she was a Boilermaker too. They were building Liberty ships in California. But later on in life, she was a nurse. But anyway, and she converted eventually. I was, I think, grown then, when she, but, maybe I was in high school. But, the boy next door. So Troy became a Catholic, and had been a Catholic my entire life, and the whole bit. And but he knew, because I never bothered to pay any attention. He knew when the different seasons came, when things changed, Advent and this kind of stuff, and what the colors were for the the church for each season. He knew all that stuff. And before long, he just became a Catholic, and for the he was going the priest, he volunteered. The priest would bless the wafers and convert them into the body of Christ. And he would go to, for the pastor, he would go to the various hospitals and go up and administer the Holy Communion to the patients and stuff like that. He got involved, just totally involved in the thing, big time in it. Now there's a lot of that is really interesting. It'd be a story if somebody could write. The whole thing would be an interesting story. I wish I could write. Of course, I'd have to be careful not to, give out information on somebody. But anyway, Troy said at some point. Now he was probably a little younger than he might have grown up a little bit by the time he decided he wanted to be, a priest or something. But he said he'd like to be a Howard, a member of the Howard family. And I think I laughed or whatever. And he said, no, he said, I want to be a Howard, So I said, okay, there's some standards, there's things you have to, and I forget what they were. I came up with some stuff, and I said, okay, you have to eat cheese and love cheese. I don't really care for cheese. And anyway, with everything going on, at some point he said, I guess I can't be a Catholic, or I can't be a Howard. He said, I just don't like cheese. I said, yeah, too bad, I thought that was funny. Now, he didn't stay a Catholic very long, because he met this nice girl through America Online or something. And right away, they wanted to get married. And so now at that point, I think he might have still been going to the or no, I think he was just helping the priest out. I think that was it. He was doing, helping the priest out. And the priest, because there's, not as the world changed, I mean, when my dad and his brothers, you have a large Catholic family. Well, one of the boys should be going really into becoming a priest. And if you had, they had 3 sisters, if you had somebody had a bunch of girls, one of those should go and be a nun, something like that. And, but, so, Troy met this girl, and they wanted to get married, and he told, the father, the priest, can we come up and have our thing, together, both of them, where the priest would talk to both of them, and, ask them questions and things like that, I guess. Troy was a different kind of a guy. I don't want to say anything to bad. Well, you're not going to know who he is or anything, but I don't want to badmouth. But he was working, but well, his parents, they bought him all kinds of guitars and equipment. They lived in a mobile home, and I was living in. Well, first my mother, was living in the mobile home next to them, and then she passed away, and then I moved. Jimmy and I moved in there or whatever, into that trailer right next to Troy. But anyway, Troy did different things, but not for long. What was it? He wanted to be not a marriage counselor. He wanted to, he decided for some reason, setting up a wedding for people, getting a photographer, doing that was what he was going to do. He didn't do very well at that. I think he did handle a couple, but there was stuff like that he, and then he he worked at a fast food place for a few days on this stuff. I mean, so he really wasn't, he was living with his parents. Now, I'm not saying anything bad about that. I lived with my parents till I was 26, and then I moved out. Well, that's when I got married. And, anyway, the priest has Troy and his bride-to-be come in. And so then, I guess the priest, what do you do for, what do you do for a living? And then Troy told him, and I forget, I think it might have been the marriage, or the, whatever. And so the priest told her, with him, they're together, and the priest told him, I guess, I guess got a little bit of this, you need to get a job and you need to be working and making money in order to support your wife and when you have children and that kind of stuff. And then he told her, now you can't marry, this, this isn't going to work. You can't marry him until he changes. So Troy dropped out of the church, Catholic Church, and he bought the stuff that priests wear, and he decided he was going to be a bishop. He bought the bishop's, thing, and decided that he was, going to do that. And that was interesting. And you heard all that just because do I still have a little bit left? No. So that was interesting. Life is interesting. I wish I had my parents, my parents were Jim and Betty. That's what I called them. That's because that's what they called each other. Now my mother's mother, my mother called her mother Mom. So Mom had, two children, my mother and her older brother. And her husband, my mother's father, he wanted nothing to do with nothing. He wanted nothing to do with his ex-wife or with Betty. And he never paid child support. Now, he did support things that he believed in. He was a member of the Klan. Of course, back then, I think, if you look at some old pictures from back then, newsreels or something, white guys out there with, their Klan garb on them and the streets filled with them. The good old days, right? Anyway, he... my mother's mother, at a quite early age, my mother was in, grade school. She had a total heart block. And she was not expected to live, she wasn't expected to live very long at all. But she not only, because so my mother was, a little girl, and Mom, my grandmother, raised, Betty, and then it ended up that Mom, my mother's mother, moved in with us. She had, she wasn't expected to live like a year or anything else, and I was in kindergarten, I think it was, when she moved in with us. So my father and mother worked, Jim and Betty worked, and Mom, my mother's mother, she had total heart block, and she was taking phenobarbital, which is kind of I don't really know much about it. A drug, something that somebody who was like to take drugs. And of course, nowadays you'd want to be, you'd want something, I guess, heavier duty or something. But anyway, she took that, and then sometimes she overdosed on it because she liked it, And she moved in with us, and then, so I was in first grade, and my job was to, dole her medicine out when it was time for her to have it, And she never asked me when it, she didn't try to get me, hey, give me the drug. No, we had an understanding, so she'd ring her little bell or whatever, and I'd go and give her, and she read to me all the books, all those books, back then that you should read, or that somebody should read to you if you were a kid, she read them all to me. And So I was in the second grade, I think it was. So she was there for my first grade and second grade. And now I changed. When I went to half a day to a public, kindergarten and Horseman school, named after a teacher or something, rather that was popular back then or something. And then for the first grade, I went to Holy Name grade school. And the first day of school, because the other kids had been there for, first grade. Anyway, that was a new area. I moved into a new area, and so the boys had chased me home that day from my first day of school, and I ran as fast as I could, I guess, to get home. And Mom, my grandmother, she was watching for me, and then she went out, and the 5 or 6 or 7, boys were there, and I guess she asked or saw what was going on, and she told me, get that thing down off the tree, whatever, the thing. And then she stripped off, I guess, the leaves or something rather, and then said, fight him. I don't want to fight him, She said, fight him. And so then she took and, using that on me. And so then they saw that, and I guess maybe they felt sorry for me, or maybe they were scared to death. I don't know, but I didn't have any, after that, I never had any trouble ever. And, but so I think it was during the second grade, I flunked. I had, whatever it was, different thing. What was it? Measles. Was it measles? Anyway, I had about 3 things, but also, of course, my grandmother would ask me when I woke up every morning, Jimmy, are you going to school? Are you okay? And I don't know. I don't feel so good, Oh, you better stay home today. So I flunked the second grade. I flunked the second grade because I had several, illnesses, more than, those are the good old days. What is it, mumps? If a boy gets mumps, I think it's mumps. It could affect your testicles. Your testicles would swell or something like that. And then you wouldn't be able to have babies after that. So parents, moms or whatever would, if Johnny down the street, if he had the mumps, those women would grab, they'd take their, say, go spend the night with, you're going to spend the night overnight with her, whatever, and so they would get it, and then they would, when they would still have testicles working, I guess. Stuff like that. Interesting time. People, my Darlene, she got polio when she was like 5. I didn't know her, or anything, but I didn't know her until 26 years later or something. So during, second grade, it must have been during the second grade, late in the second grade, or maybe the third grade. And I got woke up, I don't know what time it was, 11 o'clock at night or something like that. And Betty, my mother, was taking her mother to General Hospital because she was having chest pain. And I woke up, and they left. Then I went back to sleep, and Mom, died at the hospital then, finally, of the, total heart block. What's interesting is, till just a few years ago, anyway, I had a few years ago, I had to have a pacemaker put in. And then after that lasted for me 10 years. And then I've had a second one put in, that's been going for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. But what I didn't realize until then, my grandmother had total heart block, and she wasn't expected to live, she was expected to be not around long. And she raised up my mother, and then she was home with me, for a couple of my years, because both my parents worked. Both my parents always worked, so I was like, after my grandmother passed away, I was home alone. But what was interesting to me, fairly recently, I'm not sure when, a few years ago, my diagnosis on my medical stuff and everything, total heart block. That's one of the things that I have. And then I realized, well, wait a minute. Mom, my mother's mother, she had that. And you see the difference, Back then, when my grandmother had it, the doctor, I guess maybe the cardiologist or whatever, when new bunch of doctors came in, for schooling, he would pick her up and drive her to General Hospital, and then he'd have her, there on the stage or whatever, and I guess show her x-rays and, say, she's got this, and I guess, her, I'm not sure if he said, well, she's Walking Dead or something. I'm not sure how it worked out, but, and I thought, wow, my grandmother back then, total heart block, and that was it, and here, now, I have total heart block, but I'm not taking my medicine very well, but I've had a pacemaker and everything put in. Times have changed. I mentioned that my mother's father was a member of the Klan. And if you watch newsreels or read history or whatever, it would seem like every white male in the United States was a member of the Klan. I'm sure they weren't, not everyone, but a lot. Okay, I got sidetracked because I was going to say something about that. Oh, yeah. So, my mother, she didn't become a Catholic till I was a grown man. So when my mother and father got married, my mother's father, the Klan member, he would not go to the wedding because, the Klan was not just anti-black and anti-Jewish, but an anti-Catholic. There weren't many people left, were there, to be, But he wouldn't go to the wedding. But not long ago, I've been trying to get rid of, sending stuff off to my oldest daughter, pictures and stuff like that, because I'm 83 years of age now. My ex-wife isn't really interested in, pictures and a lot of stuff like that. So, sending it to but I was going through stuff like my baby book and all that kind of stuff. And I saw that my mother's father, who wouldn't go to the wedding, he did come to the shower or whatever they call it, new baby and people bring some presents and that kind of stuff. And he showed up and he brought some presents, and whatever. But my father totally, he did not like my mother's father. But my mother's father, my mother had a brother, an older brother. So in that family, the boy went with his father, I guess, so he could learn to be a Klan member, although I don't think he wasn't. I think it sort of died off, Well, it hasn't died off. We have a man being tried right now, a former president who I'm sure was a Klan member, or, wouldn't have loved to be, or would have outdone them. They probably wouldn't have been Klan enough for him or something. But my father never forgave, Betty's father. Anyway, he stayed with my mother's brother, her father. He, in his old age, he stayed, with them. And his Social Security money or whatever, helped the 1, 2, 3. I think there was 3. Billy, a year younger than me, and then Janet, I think it was, and then there was another one, I think. And but anyway, my mother's brother, big time drinker. One of the first memories I have, it was after World War II. And my parents and they brought me along. I had to come back from California. Housing was in short supply and stuff like that. But my father, of course, my father was not in the military. He was building Liberty ships, and my mother was building Liberty ships. And he was the only one of the 7 boys or whatever that wasn't in the military. All the rest were. And I think that sort of affected him because of, you were expected to get together for the family reunions or for Christmas Eve and for Christmas Eve and Thanksgiving. You had to go, and we went a few times and to those events, but my father did not want to go any longer, and I have a feeling, it's just guessing, that, all these brothers were in the military. One, Vince, was in the Marine Corps, and if you've seen the movies, about the, World War II, if you've seen the documentaries about World War II, and if you've seen the, movies that were made and stuff, Vince went through all of that in those islands, using flamethrowers and burning them, burning Japanese, out of their holes in the ground or whatever, and he came back messed up, big time. And I think he had 10 or 11 kids, Finally his wife left him. Before Vince went into, before World War II started, Vince was picked for the major leagues. He was picked by the Kansas City, that would be the farm team of the New York Yankees, one of the farm teams. And so he was picked, it looked like he might have made it, if World War II hadn't started, that he might have ended up, playing for the New York Yankees. But he came back messed up big time. I think I got sidetracked there's a picture. I'm sending pictures to my oldest daughter, and I might have already sent that. But there's a picture of And I remember that time, I mean, of course I was in grade school, or I don't think I was in high school. But anyway, so my mother's brother started, beating on Grandpa, and he had a cane because Grandpa got hit by a beer truck. So I think he got a little bit of money for that. But he used a cane, and he used the cane on his grown son, and he had to leave. I think he had to leave for the protection of his son or whatever for a little bit. So he came over and he stayed with us against my father's, man, Betty said, no, we got to take him in for a little bit. So he was there for a few days. But I remember my mother coming in. I was sitting next to Grandpa. There were some pictures back of me of, like on a stool or whatever, him sitting there watching cartoons and me sitting there like next to him or whatever. But anyway, I remember that my mother, she loved to take pictures. Man, that's why I've got a whole bunch of pictures. And by the way, don't do what I did. My mother took tons of pictures. She also kept everybody's phone number. I mean, she had the same, I still have that. I haven't, she kept a diary too. I bought a diary for myself. One thing I still like, I guess, but I never, is, well, look, can you see? Okay. There's a whole stack of those there, and there's some more over there. But I like, and I bought kind of a nice diary. I mean, not expensive, but it was, and I started filling that out, and I kept it, and it helped me out tremendously over the years. And, however, when I got, you wouldn't believe how many times something came up, and I could tell, an insurance company or something sent me a letter. When we got divorced, I gave to the ex-wife. My father became a union official, and they gave him, he got not a new car every year, but they supplied him because he had to cover 4 states, doing contracts and grievances and stuff like that. So when he passed away, of course, I got my father had retired. And then he passed away, so I got his car. And so when I got divorced, when Darlene and I got divorced, I gave her the house. Now, it wasn't paid for, but it had been paid a lot on it and everything. So I gave her the house, and I, paid child support. And so she had a car, she had a nice house, and to begin with, I was living with my mother. She lived in a mobile home, and I moved in with her until I got a mobile home, trailer trash. See, what was I on that? There was some reason I was on that subject. I can't remember now what it was. But, I should have been doing, that's what, I got to learn to do, start doing something like, I could pull up pictures. I haven't scanned all the pictures, I'm not going to, and stuff. Oh, the pictures. Yeah, it's funny, certain pictures I can look at, I can remember, and my mother, when her father had to move in with us for a few days, and my dad was like fucking pissed. And anyway, there's a picture of my mother's father at one end of the couch, me, with my arm around my grandfather, my dad at the other end, and the look on my dad's face looking at, Betty as she was taking the picture. There's a bunch of pictures and stuff like that. Oh, my my mother then, when I got that first diary thing and started filling it out for myself, she said, "Can you get me one of those?" And so every year I got her one of those. Then for the last few years, she'd say, "Okay, Jimmy, you don't have to get me a diary because I'm not going to be here." And of course, she said that every year for years, And then when she did pass away, there was, all those things. And well, one, she was always saying, "Jimmy, sit down and look at these pictures with me, and everything. And I want to tell you." And I said, "Later, not now. I'm busy, And I never did that. And of course, I wish there's a ton of pictures, I've been going through them and sending them to my oldest daughter, and if she finds anything useful, she scans it and puts it on TikTok. By the way, below you'll find a link to LaDonna's TikTok thing, and she's smart. She didn't get that from me because I wasn't smart. But anyway, you'll see. Anyway, check out my LaDonna's TikTok page. Subscribe or whatever. But also, anyway, my mother, passed away. And so I went in there and there was, boxes of pictures. And I couldn't throw pictures away, so they ended up, But of course, a lot. Who are these people? A lot of that going on, and I wished. And if you're young or whatever, of course we've got tons of people, cell phones, people taking pictures, just doing all this kind of crap. I mean, I've taken a lot of pictures, but well, I've tried to. I guess I'm probably in the same situation. Take a lot of pictures and nobody's going to look at them, And, but I wish that I had. Anyway, so my mother had these diaries. Every year I got her one. She loved it, And she was always writing stuff in there. And so anyway, she passed away. So I went in there and I thought, okay, I'm kidding about this, of course, but I thought I better look through these. Maybe she told where she buried some gold or something, So I just picked, and then I read, what was in there. And I thought, and I put that down and took another one and, oh, wow, so she said that, whatever. So I just took all that stuff that she'd written for all those years, and I never looked at it, you know what I mean? I threw it all away. But I kept doing my own diary. Of course, I've thrown all those away, too. I threw those away after I got divorced from Darlene. And anyway, I still used, I was using my diary writing stuff. And that's, what day I worked and grievances that I wrote against the director of security or some interesting arrest that I made or when security officers that I worked with were shot or something, I put stuff like that in there and never really used it. Well, yeah, a insurance company sent me a letter and said, you owe us X number of hundred of dollars because you ran our client's car off, like 7 years ago or I don't know what, something like that, into a ditch or whatever, and you owe us this money, and if you don't send us this money, we're going to have your driver's license revoked, and we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And actually, my memory is not too good. Never has been good. God, when he was doing the things that he should have been doing, he didn't give me a big dick. He didn't make me smart. He didn't make me an athlete. He didn't, all this stuff. And I thought, yeah, fuck you. But, so, anyway, I opened up the diary, It was like, I knew exactly where I was. I knew that I had not been in Kansas City, Kansas. I lived in Kansas City, Missouri. But I knew a little bit about Kansas City, Kansas. And I made it a point not to go to Kansas City, Kansas. I had to go a couple of times. But I didn't go on this occasion or anything like that. And so then I contacted these people. I wrote back to them, And I informed them, that I received your communications or whatever, and your accusations or whatever. Let me tell you that I have not been in the city of Kansas City, I live in Kansas City, Missouri. I have not been, and my car has not been in Kansas City, Kansas on that date, and I have not been over there in years. And then there was some other stuff, something that they said, and I countered that or whatever. And I said, I'm going to give you, because they gave me some type of a, thing. And I forget what it was, I'm going to give you 7 days. I expect to hear from you, in written form, stating that you are not going to, have my driver's license revoked, and that you're not going to do this and this that you said you were going to do. And let me tell you what I'm going to do if I don't get this apology from you and a statement from you that you are, whatever. I'm going to contact the insurance, such and such. I looked them up, the thing that, handles insurance and other things, like that. And I sent that back. I got a letter. We're very sorry, Mr. Howard. Yeah, wait, don't worry, everything's taken care of. We're not, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Please, please don't do that to us. I bet you they were pretty small, group, somebody doing that. Many, many years later, okay, so, I was divorced at that period. So I kept my diary going. And then, I can't remember the exact timing on this, but anyway, when I got divorced, the ex-wife was not very kind to me when I got divorced, and she should have been, because I was a good husband and a good father and everything else, but she wasn't. And so I put stuff in the diary, And then after, then we were divorced and everything. And then I think I sort of stopped writing. And I wrote some more stuff, in the diary. And so then I stopped. But I kept them, because it had helped me on one occasion and maybe more occasions. Well, because, when I was working hospital security or whatever, that diary did help me. My father, like I told you, was a Boilermaker, and then he became a union official. And I was in grade school or whatever when he was pretty courageous, because the union was being run it was being run by racist people, but it was being run by the guy that was the business agent, was not a Mormon. What's that? Masons Union. Not union, but the Masons, Masonic organization. And if you were working as a Boilermaker, and you wanted to be, especially for the jobs like I worked as a Boilermaker for, several years. But I worked in the shop. I never asked to go out in the field. My father was the business agent, assistant business agent. He could have put me out in the field making a lot more money and everything else. And all the union people wanted to be working working in the field. But I knew I wouldn't go ask my dad to do me a favor, and I knew too my dad would not have, he wouldn't have put me out in the field or anything else, because he was a union man, and all the union, the black members of the Boilermakers Union, the union shop or whatever, the business agent and the other assistant business agent, and my father, the other assistant, but the guy at the top was, he sent his Mason buddies out there and did stuff like that. Did a lot of stuff, corrupt stuff, really. But my father didn't, he didn't take advantage of the system. He didn't do a whole bunch of stuff. And when stuff came up, like, when the blacks who were working with me, and others not in the field, but, in the shops or whatever, making less money and that type of stuff. When a bunch of them got together and went to the union meeting hall, or went to the union, and said, we're union members, we pay union dues, we pay the same thing that they pay, or, the ones that go, and we want to, and the business agent, nope, not going to happen. And then when my dad heard about that, my dad went, and said, those black members, they're members of the union, they're brothers, and they are, and so the business agent, started sending them out. Not as many as he should, but my father got it, they were brothers. And several things came up like that later on, where, no, they're brothers, And what was the other one that came up? And my father stood up, and, I talked about this once before. Unions wanted to, not just the Boilermakers Union, but unions, how long have I been talking? An hour. Yeah, I see the timer ticking. Okay, I'm going to have to wrap this up. Anyway, okay, the unions, not just the Boilermakers Union, but unions, especially craft unions, carpenters, bricklayers, those things like that. The unions wanted to be able to set up a was in my mind a while ago, but I didn't speak it fast enough. Bring them in as apprentices. So they couldn't do it. The unions weren't allowed to do that because there were laws passed by the federal government, maybe state governments too, but by the federal government, stating that stuff in the unions had to be done by seniority. And so you just couldn't. And if you're going to have an apprenticeship program, like for the Boilermakers, I didn't go through it. That would have been my father would have. I wouldn't have asked. My father wouldn't have done it. Unless I had seniority. But you had seniority, so that meant that a member of the union, it went by like seniority. And, the blacks were a lot of, they in the beginning they probably couldn't get into the union, They were lucky to get into the union. So their seniority would have been, and but the union wanted to, anyway, they had rules, you just couldn't. And so the government had to change the Taft-Hartley Act and the Landon-Grifton Act and things like that to allow it. And that way, then a young guy could come to the Boilermakers or the bricklayers or union or something like that and get taken into the union. And then he'd be a young guy, and maybe just out of high school or something, but somebody who could do the job. And so then the union could say, okay, you're going to be in the apprenticeship program. And so let's take the Boilermakers. So you're new, you come in, there's guys there that have been in a long time, in the union been a long time, and they're not, they're not out in the field or something like that. But the union can say, okay, you're coming in, Billy, and you're going to learn how to use an acetylene torch. You're going to learn how to weld. You're going to learn how to do blueprints. You're going to learn how, and all these things, and go through the things. So when you go to a job, out in the field, and you show up, and you had to explain to the other guys, these guys, I've been a Boilermaker for 5 years, and they didn't teach me blueprint reading or blah blah blah. I mean, some of them knew it, and some of them learned it on their own and whatever. But then they knew, okay, this is the apprenticeship program, and this guy's coming in, and it's gonna help you, all of you are members, because when we go out on these jobs, if we get out there and we don't have somebody who can do, whatever's, so my father stood up for the union official at the Boilermakers Local 83 or whatever. No, there is no way we're, putting any, he didn't use the word black, I'm sure. That's one thing too, my dad, I don't think I ever heard him use the N-word. Now, he said a few things that were kind of weird. One thing that he would say was something would come up, about something, you can kiss my black ass at 12th and Main, or something. That was like downtown Kansas City, Missouri or something. But no, he didn't, and anyway, he said, no, they are brothers, They're Boilermakers and they're brothers, and they are entitled to, and so they're again the chief business agent at the top or whatever. He had to give in to my dad because my dad was, I learned a lot from my dad. Oh, that's, I helped him get elected when I was in like high school or whatever, mimeographing off stuff and all kinds of stuff for him. And then once he became a business agent or whatever, the government, just about every day it would be things from Washington, D.C., from the National Labor Relations Board or whatever that were sent. And he had to take out the things that just replaced, court cases and decisions and stuff like that. He had to take the stuff out and then put the new stuff in where it went. I did that for him. And of course, unfortunately for the people that I worked for later on in life, unfortunately for them, I read that. Oh my God. Anyway, I would take out the old and read the old. Oh, and then I'd read the new. Okay, that's the changes that they made, and put that in there. And then when my dad got home or whatever, I'd say, oh, here's the old material. You want me to throw it away? Which he did, naturally. And then I'd, whatever. But I think I've talked too long. Oh, anyway, I maybe I didn't get to that. Oh, yeah. Like my diary that I was writing in, which of course, this is sort of that, isn't it? Except I started doing this in 1982. Interesting world. And I'm not too smart, not handsome, not, don't have much going for me, but I can look back and things appear on television or on YouTube or, movies and things like that. And I remember, I was in the Civil Defense, the Ground Observer Corps. I was a monitor for the Federal Communications Commission. I put out a thing called, now of course now a space communications thing. I put that out in the publication that I put out every month for years. And there are things in there that are interesting. You know, the fact that I used to listen to WHB in Kansas City, Missouri. At night, there was a guy that interviewed, he interviewed people, talked to people on the radio, and I'd call in occasionally. And there was a guy that came on, you know, the show. Can't remember the name of the disc jockey, or he didn't play music. But a guy came on, and the guy was talking about Cuba and the Bay of Pigs and Swan Island and all that kind of stuff. And I was, of course, listening to it and everything, and then said, okay, well, let's take a call, you know. So I called in, and I said about Swan Island, and then I said, I asked some questions, and then I said also about what was that? What was it called? The CIA set up a front organization, a shipping organization that didn't have any ships, but they did, build a transmitter and stuff on Swan Island and stuff. Anyway, so I started asking this guy these questions, and so I asked quite a few questions, and the guy's answering me back, and then Yates was it? No, it wasn't Yates. I can't remember his name. Anyway, he said, well, I guess it's time we'll move on to the next caller, or whatever. And then, so I'm sitting there, and this guy says, it's on the air, and this guy says, I don't know who that guy was that just called in, but he has his finger on, something like that. I can't remember the exact thing he said. He's got his finger on. He knows what's going on, or whatever. And there's other stuff like that. I did a space. When Sputnik 1 was launched up, I tracked it with my shortwave radio and stuff. And then I immediately started a space communications column in the publication that I was putting out. 500 issues a month went out. Took me an entire month to get them out. I'm using a mimeograph machine. You don't know what a mimeograph machine is, oh, you poor people. And not just, I scanned pictures, and then I could have them turned into stencils. And anyway, I started a space communications column that was in there. Now, I never claimed, like I claim, hey, I might be one of the first people in the world to, to have a bulletin board system or whatever that is. Not the first, but one of the first. But the space communications column, I didn't know of any other. But by the way, the government sent me every day. I'd get them, stack in the mail. Mailman probably must have wondered what in the hell is going on here, because it was just the, aperture and what is the other end of the thing, so information so I could track the satellites and stuff. There was a guy, Elmo Melton, I cannot remember, an amateur radio operator. I can't remember I wasn't a ham operator then. But he put out, if you happen to have one, I would love to have it and be able to record it. Put it on. If you happen to have, if you're an old, maybe ham radio operator, or maybe somebody who was a ham and you're a ham or something, and his, the ham passed away and his wife sold some of his ham radio stuff and then gave the rest of the stuff away. If you happen to have what was it called? His name was Elmo Melton. And he, in Kansas City, Missouri, he was tracking Earth. He found Earth, like the NASA announced, we launched a rocket with a satellite in it, and we lost it. We can't find where it is. And he, Elmo Melton would then call them up and give them the location, apogee and perigee of, whatever. Pretty amazing. And I can't remember the guys, I'd like to give him some credit or whatever. But I put out a space communications column, but I never said that I was the first, because I'm sure that at NASA or whatever it was called, I'm sure there was somebody doing it there, they on a wall. I'm sure they had it up, Sputnik, 19.995 kilohertz and 20.005 kilohertz or something like that. I saw the other day it was back a little bit longer than that. A thing about the USSR, and there was in the USSR there was one of their events coming up, like the 10th, anniversary of the great, Soviet Union and blah, and people are attending, and that kind of stuff. And then they talked about that the Khrushchev, or whoever was the leader then, wasn't Khrushchev, somebody else after, I guess Khrushchev had died, that they wanted to do a special event, something, because this is the such and such anniversary, and all these people are coming to it, the rank and file people, and, the people are actually running the place. And so they decided they wanted to do something because of space, They'd already launched Sputnik 1, and they launched up the dog that died in orbit and all this kind of stuff. And so what they wanted to do was something very special. So, this is top secret. Here's what we're going to do. We've launched, a spacecraft, up there with 3 astronauts in it. But now what we want to do is we've got it up there, and what we want you to come up with, what can you come up with? Okay, here's what we can come up with. We'll launch another spacecraft at the same time, not at the same time, but it'd go up there. And then one, or maybe more, of the 3, or probably just one, I'm guessing, well, then he will leave the ship in orbit, and then he will move over and get in the other ship. And that's going to show, that's going to make the Americans, they'll be, laughing stock. They'll show them, or whatever. So that was the plan. And so then they tried to set that up, and it's not going to work. The astronauts are telling, the cosmonauts. The cosmonauts are telling, the management, no, it cannot be done. It will not happen. If an astronaut tries that, he will die. And we have a list here of just with the ship that's, up there. Here are, 25 things that are going to be disastrous that are going to happen. And the ship that just is going to be going up there, here are the 10 things that are going to be disastrous and people are going to die, and all this type of stuff. But the head guy with the USSR or whatever, no, I want this for our centennial or whatever. This will happen. And you can find that, if you find that link for that one, by the way, it's on YouTube someplace, this story. Please send me the link and I'll put it down below, I guess, because I'm talking about it now. I'll put that link down below. But so, the guy that head Russian or whatever, this will happen. It will be fantastic. We'll show the Americans and we'll show their, NASA and that kind of stuff that, man, we are number one. We launched the first Sputnik, the first thing into orbit, which I tracked along with a lot of other people on my shortwave radio. So the astronauts or whatever, the cosmonauts, this will not work. We're going to, they're going to die. And maybe the ones in the other ship are going to die too. It's not going to happen. And they're telling that, no, it will happen. The head guy, it's going to happen. It'll be great. And So a guy who was one of the astronauts, one of the cosmonauts, and he had been into space already and come back safely. And he is in Russia or in the USSR, a gigantic hero with the USSR, you know, and he's a great hero, and it worked out great, for him, and prestige and all kinds of stuff. And so the person who's going to go is, they've decided, okay, who should we send? Okay, we're going to send this cosmonaut. He'll be the one, he'll go up to the ship, and then he'll transfer over to the other ship, and it will be just blow America away. And whatever. And this, now the one who, okay, this guy, he has a wife and a couple kids, I think, little kids, and he's the one who's designated to go. Well, the astronaut who is the cosmonaut, who went up and who is a big hero in the USSR, he is a real hero, and well, I think all of them were. He is, of course, they're all best friends, the cosmonauts, and he's best friends with this other guy he's been up into space, and they're saying that he's going to go, the leader of the USSR is saying he is going to go, But anyway, the cosmonaut who's been, and he has, I know, a child, one at least, I think, and a wife, of course, and he tries to talk, because he has some standing. He tried, no, I'm telling you, so. But anyway, he's in a position, so he says, no, I'm going. And in order to save his friend's life, because his friend has a wife and a small child or something, and this guy has a wife, and a child or whatever, and he says, no, I'm going. And of course, the other guy, no, they want me to, I have to go, you've already been, and no, he said, nope, I'm going. What's interesting about this is, fitting in a little bit with you've already lost track, I was putting out a space communications column, every month, which was, wasn't anything special. I think it was kind of neat that I did this, but, information came to me, and not just to me, but it came to me that I'm not sure it was actually in the USSR. Maybe it was the country Poland or Hungary or something but it was very close, this country, and where these people were with their shortwave radios. They were very close they were in the range of the facility there in the USSR that Sputnik, or whatever they called it, would pass over from time to time, So anyway, this guy who said to his, friend, no, and he did, he was, he told his wife, before he went, this, I'm not coming back, honey, and hugged his kid, and, a kid or kids or whatever, and went, and his wife knew, and he knew. And so the launch has taken place, but some people with shortwave radios, like I had, but, they were in a better position than I was, in the United States. They could pick up communication, because some of the communications was done naturally, just as Sputnik would go over, their space launch facility or whatever. It was easier for communications by shortwave radio, and that type of stuff. So, but anyway, people in Hungary or whatever the country was that was close that had, a lot of them who were monitoring 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, just to, and of course some of them spoke, Russian and stuff. So, but anyway, they hear that now they couldn't have trouble, it wasn't the best of, wasn't the highest frequencies and all that kind of stuff. But they could make out some of it, and I'm not sure how much they could make out, but the astronaut crying, the astronaut talking to his wife, and his wife crying. And I think maybe a kid, crying in the background maybe, or whatever. And so they, made it, and that came to my, and to others, they put it out and people picked it up, this story that, hey, these communications on 20.005 or 19.995, whatever, I can't remember what the frequency, that was the frequency, but maybe they'd moved a little bit higher in frequency. But they picked it up and put the word out, and of course, the USSR, the USSR denied it, or either didn't respond or denied it. That's baloney, But that was the astronaut talking to his wife, and his wife talking to him, and saying goodbye, and that they loved each other. And then, sure enough, the thing didn't happen, because it couldn't be done, and he died trying it. It was very ambitious what he was, leaving the ship, and because they'd come up with, there was like 15 or 20 reasons just on each thing, 20 reasons this won't work, 20, and then there was like 40 reasons that leaving the ship and going over to this other ship and being let in or whatever, It was like, there wasn't like one or two things, and then you might think, well, maybe they'll be lucky. No, it was, a death penalty. So anyway, of course, I tried to tune those frequencies, and I couldn't pick them up in Kansas City, Missouri, But I did put the information out. But here, that was, after all this time, came out recently at some point, and that was interesting. I guess I've talked long enough. Thank you very much for, well, that just kind of shows you. And the things that went on, back in the early days of shortwave radio, early days of computer bulletin board systems, and all that kind of stuff. There's a book out. I loaned stuff out. I never get it back. If I loan a DVD out, it never comes back. When I was making copies, of movies, of course I was making them on beta instead of VHS or whatever, and then but making copies of Friendly Persuasion and movies that I love or whatever. But anyway, what was I going to say? Oh, I had time to stop anyway. Thank you very much for watching.